As India and Canada grapple with deteriorating diplomatic ties, all eyes are on whether Canada will take action against wanted criminals and terrorists on its soil. On top of the list is Arshdeep Singh Dalla, alias Arsh Dalla, who is wanted by the Indian agencies. His name figures in the top 25 list of wanted terrorists shared by the Indian agencies with the Canadian police. Can close cooperation between law enforcement agencies prevent the free fall of diplomatic ties between India and Canada? Or will the criminal networks which are fueling the pro-Khalistan terrorist nodes across the globe go scot-free on Canadian soil? Let us hear from Ward Elcock, the former director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, on why law enforcement agencies are finding it difficult in Canada to support the Indian cause.
Well, I think this one is a good deal more complicated than the average disagreement between countries. There have been a number of attempts that the National Security Advisor testified yesterday before a parliamentary committee here in Ottawa, and there have been a number of attempts by Ottawa to Canadian diplomats and others to meet with the Indians. A number of those meetings were either canceled or just simply nobody showed up. The only one I'm aware of that actually went ahead was a meeting in Singapore, where the Canadian police, National Security Advisor, and our Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs met with Indian officials and provided them with some information and made some suggestions as to how to move forward. There was supposed to be, I understand, a subsequent meeting that never took place, and the Indian government decided to make public its position. The issue with the police here in Canada was simply that the Canadian police could not make contact with the Indian diplomats it wanted to talk to. The Indian government clearly was not prepared to waive diplomatic immunity of its diplomats here in Canada, who the RCMP wanted to interview because of the information they had collected about their activities. And then as a result, the Canadian police took the step of making public some of the information on the basis that there were threats to a number of Canadians. Some 11 or 12 Canadians have been warned by the police. They have an obligation in our law to warn people if there are threats to their security. They had warned 11 or 12 people in Canada over the last 6 months or so about activities that might be directed at them that would endanger their safety. And they were concerned that if they didn't take action, that those threats would remain a problem. As a consequence, the RCMP made its statement, and the Canadian government, the Indian government, having refused to waive the diplomatic immunity of the 6 diplomats that Canada wanted to talk to, that the RCMP wanted to talk to, they had no choice but to expel those diplomats from Canada. And by that point, everything becomes public. It really is open to the public at this point. You're right, the trials have not yet begun, but one presumes that they will take place over the next few months. And we will then start to see evidence produced in the court. What that evidence will be is I don't know. I'm not privy to it at this point, but one assumes that there will be both witnesses and intercept information that will be provided that will provide more clarity to the story. Well, let me approach that question with a couple of responses. First, I'm sure that more than adequate care was taken with respect to ensuring the security of Indian diplomats in Canada. I doubt that there were any real concerns on the part of, or should have been any real concerns on the part of Indian diplomats. As to the information that Indian agencies may have provided to Canada, as I think I've said before, the public safety minister has on at least a couple of occasions said publicly that the information that India had provided with respect to a number of cases was deficient in terms of the end result that the Indian government wanted to achieve, didn't meet the test of Canadian law. If the information doesn't meet the test of Canadian law, then India can provide all the information it wants. But if it doesn't meet the test, it's not going to secure the result that the Indian government would like to have. So if the Indian government really wants action to be taken, it has to provide information that meets the test of Canadian law. Now, what the deficiency in the information that was provided, I obviously don't know because I don't have access to that information. But the government has clearly said publicly that it was deficient. Maybe the view in India, the view here would be quite clearly that the Canadian government has gone the extra mile in terms of trying to make contact with the Indian government and find solutions to this issue. And that in the circumstances of India's refusal to deal with the issue, the Canadian government has had to make some of the information public. And some of it will inevitably become public in any case, because the court trials will almost certainly reveal information about activities of Indian diplomats in Canada and contacts with criminals or criminal organizations in this country in attempts to secure their purposes, secure their end result, desired end result. So the American government is in some sense already involved. Canada has every interest in ensuring that its allies will be on its side, and as a consequence, that means that some information will be revealed to the Americans. I'm sure a lot of information has in fact been revealed to the Americans. The issue of the Washington Post interview, the National Security Advisor was absolutely crystal clear yesterday that no information that was provided to the Washington Post was classified in any way. It may not have been released publicly in any other place, but it was not classified. I doubt that they have gone beyond repair forever. That seems a bit of a stretch. Usually, eventually, countries will find a way to repair relationships. In this case, I think it will be some time, however, before relationships are repaired. Inevitably, exchanges between intelligence agencies are affected by the relationship between the countries for which they serve. So the relationships with Indian agencies will certainly in the short to medium term, probably not be will be fairly frosty, I would suspect. And that's an inevitable result of the relationship, the problems in the relationship between Canada and India at this point. But again, I mean, the reality is those exchanges only work when countries provide information that's useful and sufficient for the purpose for which it's provided. And as I've said before, and as the Minister of Public Safety has said, in the cases where India has provided information in recent time, that information was not sufficient to achieve the purpose the Indian government wanted to achieve. If it isn't sufficient, then there isn't much we can do about it on this side of the ocean. Although I am sure where there was information, and it corroborated information that the government of Canada already had, that it would take some action. But we simply don't arrest people on the basis of information from a foreign country. It requires more than that for us to it has to be information that's sufficient under our system to allow us to actually act. My assumption is that if the India provided Canada with the information, sufficient information, for example, to undertake an extradition or to make an arrest, Canada would take action. But I think I've also said that there have been times in the past when information that India has provided was not sufficient for the purpose it was offered, much as the national security, the public safety minister has said that the current requests are not, the information was not sufficient. So it's really, if the Indian government provides sufficient information, then I'm sure the government of Canada would act. But if it doesn't provide the information, Canada can't act on the basis of nothing.
The terror criminal links between Hardeep Singh Nijjar and Arsh Dalla in Canada is just one amongst them. There were many others like Rinda in Pakistan who forged links with Lakhbir Landa in Canada and Harpreet Singh in the US to carry out terror acts in Punjab. While majority of the wanted terrorists use the illegal route to enter Canada, terrorists like Lakhbir Landa and Arsh Dalla entered Canada using their own passports, using the tourist visas or visitor visas to enter Canadian shores. Will Canada take action against Arsh Dalla and his associates and act in the cases of crime and terror on its soil will be a litmus test for the Justin Trudeau government.